Hi, this is Bob Papa, voice of the New York Football Giants, and this is the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast.
Welcome back, Giants fans, to our pre-season interview series. Joining me for this episode, I've got Iain, fellow member of the Giants UK group. Thanks for joining me, man. How you doing?
Hey, good to see you, Dan. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure meeting you as well, mate. Thanks for coming on. It's always, we were just chatting beforehand. It's always nice to talk Giants football, and there's one thing we can both do is talk Giants football. So we're going to crack on and talk for the next 15, 20 minutes all about our passion, and that is the New York Football Giants. This series, obviously, we thought it'd be a bit of fun to chat with fans, content creators, and some other special guests too. And we've got 5 sort of questions lined up for you, and then we'll have a quick fire round of predictions at the end. Sound good to you?
Yeah, sounds good. Let's get going.
Fantastic. So just going to find out a little bit about you first of all. So tell us about like your fandom. Like, how long have you been a fan? You know, have you been to any games in obviously the UK that the Giants have been to, and any games in the US as well in New Jersey?
Yeah, I mean, I got into American football in 1986. I was a 10-year-old boy at the time, and I was just flicking through the TV, and I managed to catch a game between the Cowboys and the Bears, and it was at the old Wembley Stadium. And for a 10-year-old, I'd never seen anything like it. And I think from that moment, I was completely hooked on the NFL. So that was around about the August of the 86 preseason. And ever since then, I've been a New York Giants fan. I mean, there's not a day goes by where I don't watch podcasts, read about the Giants in terms of books, etc., watch old YouTube footage of games in the 80s and 90s and so on and so forth. So the Giants are part of my DNA. I've got a tattoo of the Giants. My dog's called Eli.
Go on, love that.
Yeah, I mean, Phil Simms is my favourite Giant of all time. But when we got a dog, I wanted to call the dog Phil. But that got vetoed. So it was like the kids that, no, we're not calling our dog Phil. So I was fair enough. What about Eli then?
It's quite cool though.
Yeah. He's a little cockapoo. He's a good little dog. And so, yeah, basically everyday thing for me. As I say, the Giants are part of my DNA. I was fortunate enough to see them 3 times up to press, a couple of London games, one at Twickenham, one at Wembley. And then when I turned 40, it was about 8 years ago, my wife booked me a trip to New York to see the Giants. But she stayed at home, and I went with 2 of my friends. Oh. And they're both really big Giants fans as well. So we went for 6 days. She managed to get pre-game field passes as well for us. So we were on the field before the game. In touching distance of Odell Beckham, it was then, and Eli Manning, etc. And lo and behold, the Giants beat the Eagles on that day, which is quite a rarity. So we were, because I hate the Eagles, F the Eagles. I can't stand the Eagles.
Don't we all?
So yeah, that was one of the highlights of my life. Really, being stood on the sideline at MetLife Stadium, just soaking it all in. It's like the cathedral of Giants football. We did a bit of a stadium tour the day after. So typically when you do the stadium tours, you need about a dozen people. And there wasn't anybody booked on the day after. So we just bought 12 tickets, and the 3 of us went. And we had the whole tour to ourselves. And the lady humoured us. She took us into the Legends Lounge, and we were doing that for about 2 or 3 hours, went on the field, threw a few passes on the field, etc. Caught a pass in the end zone where OBJ pulled down that one-hander. So it was just this stuff of dreams, really. I mean, I dreamt of seeing the Giants for years and years, and then, as I say, about 8 years ago, finally got to make that dream a reality. So I love the history of the Giants. I collect game-worn Giants helmets, as you can see behind. So I've got a few good helmets there.
It's an impressive collection.
So I've got Brandon Jacobs.
Actually, go on.
Yeah, so Brandon Jacobs' game-worn helmet from 2007. And he wore that helmet at the first international series game against the Dolphins. And he wore that helmet for 2 or 3 games before that as well. So
I bet that'll set you back a pretty penny.
Yeah, I won't go into the price. I mean, it's much to my wife's dismay, to be honest. But so I've got Brandon Jacobs from 2007. I've got Tiki Barber from 2003, and I think he wore that towards the tail end of 2002 as well in the playoffs, and then into 2003. The cool thing about that helmet is he wore it at Foxborough Stadium, and if you remember, it was grass back then, and it's got field chalk and grass and mud all over it still.
Love that.
Just to my left, your right, all the way around, is Aaron Ross's Super Bowl 46 helmet.
Sweet. Oh,
so
bloody
he wore
hell.
that. Yeah,
That's
wore
impressive.
that when we beat the Pats. So that was quite a coup to get that, really. I was in the right place at the right time and just made the guy an offer. And I pinch myself to this day that I've got a Super Bowl helmet. And Aaron Ross was a really good cornerback as well. So
yeah, mate, he was underrated cornerback as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you look back at the guy's resume, he's a first-round draft choice, two-time Super Bowl champion. He was the defensive player of the year for the Giants as well, I think, in 07.
Yeah, I think so.
And then the final game-worn helmet I've got is Hakeem Nicks from 2013. So he wore that for the whole season, and it's signed by JPP, Victor Cruz, and a number of other Giants as well. Then I've just got a few signed helmets. I've got Eli Manning, Lawrence Taylor, Y.A. Tittle, Sam Huff, quite a few of the old-time greats. Because as I say, I'm quite big into the Giants' history as well, so I'll read and research about Bob Folwell, Doc Alexander, some of the first coaches, Steve Owen, etc. And it's just part of my happy place. If I have a busy day at work or I'm particularly stressed out, I just turn to the Giants, and it's such a distraction.
You go to your happy place, even though it's not been particularly happy in the last few years. It's still your happy place.
It is what it is. I mean, we were talking about this off air. I mean, if you've watched the Giants for as long as we have, it's the ebb and flow of the franchise. I mean, they had the wilderness years from 64 to 81, 82. This is very much the wilderness years 2.0. And I can see some progress. I can see us hopefully coming out the other side now and at least being competitive. But you can't win all the time. Unless you're the Chiefs or unless you're a dynasty like the old Cowboys and 49ers were, then it just is what it is. But come rain or shine, I'll be there watching the Giants.
Love that. And obviously, I know you said it's sort of like it's been a few down years recently, but how would you sum up last season?
I think 6-11 is never good. To score the least points since 1979 is not good. I think that from that first game, it was just a bit of a downhill spiral from there. I mean, our starters were paper thin. We got quite a few injuries. I think, and when the schedule came out for last year, I looked at that schedule and I thought, man, that's a brutal schedule. But the Giants kind of downplay it as they do every year. Yeah. And I think the schedule played a little bit into that as well. Injuries were just not a very deep roster. And then obviously your QBs start to get injured and it just goes downhill from there. And I think one of the big things that wasn't touched on was Brian Daboll not doing the play calling. So he really wanted to be the head coach and that was his remit. And I think Kafka really struggled. And I think this year will be different. Hopefully with Daboll at the reins, it will be a bit more dynamic.
I absolutely think so, the same as well. I think Kafka is Mike Kafka is Mike Kafka. He is what it is, but for whatever reason, play calling on that offense, he seemed to struggle, and he seems to struggle to get the best out of the players that we had. I think Dave's is gonna hopefully be a revelation in terms of his play calling because he did it at Buffalo. He worked with the likes of Josh Allen at Buffalo, and he's got what it takes to call plays in this league at a very, very high level. So I think we'll see a turn of fortunes on offense this season for sure.
I think it was just that perfect recipe of injuries, a really tough schedule. We don't have a very talented roster. I mean, I think last year we were so far behind other people within our division. It wasn't even competitive. Yeah. So you're trying to make the best out of this bad situation, and it was never going to end well. So
no, and I mean, week one just sort of like was the catalyst of the season. Really, it started off so badly, we just sort of didn't know whether to laugh or cry.
Yeah,
we went to Birmingham to watch the game, and we were sat in this in a casino in Birmingham at sort of 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning on this Sunday night, and we didn't know sort of really just what to say because it was just such a case of like, do we laugh? Do we cry? Are we angry? Yeah. Like what emotions are we going through? And it was a very strange one, and obviously because losing to the Cowboys is. We'd never like losing to the Cowboys, let's face it, but to lose so convincingly and just look so inept, it wasn't a great way to start the season. And it went on from there. Yeah, we went on a little sort of win streak mid-season with Tommy DeVito under center, but yeah, the season was, I think, done and dusted pretty much exactly there.
Yeah,
I think the season was pretty much done and dusted as soon as as soon as some of these big injuries started coming out.
I think we've got good component parts. We just didn't have enough. And as I say, all of the other extenuating circumstances, it was just never going to be our season.
No, I think hopefully 2024 will be a lot more positive, and I'm pretty hopeful going into the season. Obviously, you're talking about preseason and sort of since the last end of the 2023 year, the Giants were obviously on Hard Knocks. Have you managed to watch it?
I did, by hook or by crook. I managed to find it. They didn't make it easy for us, but I've watched it, and I've watched them all several times. So yeah, I absolutely geek out on that stuff. I love it. I mean, I almost like the behind the scenes stuff as much as the actual season itself at times. And I think that's been a welcome relief when the football's been poor. There's been some other good content.
You know, it's been great. It's been great because it's given us something to talk about and really something to get our teeth into. I know previously we've had Giants live videos on YouTube. They've been sort of like 10, 15-minute snippets, but this was sort of like 45 minutes, 5 weeks in a row. It was really just sort of, yes, this is what we want. And I mean, obviously it was very sort of front office focused and centric and based around like that side of the team. But I don't know about you, but the first time the opening credits came on, opening sort of credits, whatever you call it, title sequence. When the opening title sequence came on with that Hard Knocks music, and you see the Giants logo, it was like chills down the spine moment. It was like, yes, we've made it. We're on Hard Knocks. But
we're a trailblazing franchise as well too. The first sort of off-season Hard Knocks, and it very much goes against the grain for the Maras. They're very much sort of in the shadows, not in the spotlight, and that stems from sort of Wellington Mara through to John Mara, etc. And I think that will have gone against the grain in terms of letting the cameras into the inner sanctum of the Giants, etc. And I'd love to see the bits that were edited out as well. I mean, we got to see some bits, but I wonder what they edited out in that too.
There'd be a hell of a lot edited out because Dave's were doing playing copyrighted music that they couldn't have shown. I thought that was absolute genius. Anything they don't want to be shown, just put some music on.
That's right.
I know they paid for the Beyonce song, wasn't it? Because they obviously had it as part. They had it as part of one of the episodes, obviously with the poker table. That's the only song that the HBO paid for, and that's the only sort of snippet we got with some music on. But what are your major takeaways from it?
I mean, I'm a bit of a sado. I really got off on the fact that I could see what pictures he had on the walls and the types of players and the old black and white photographs. I mean, one of the best bits for me is when sort of John Mara walked into Brandon Brown's office, and first thing he said was, look at that photograph, and it was of Y.A. Tittle and Frank Gifford on the sidelines at Yankee Stadium, I think. And John Mara was like, well, I was probably there. I was probably at that game. And just kind of seeing the inside of 1925 Giants Drive and just to understand the lay of the land in that respect. And I think when you feel like you've got a good grasp on who the key players are at the Giants, there's always names that you've not heard of. So the scouts, etc., on the road all the time. I mean, it's a machine.
I love the focus on the scouts. Yeah, I love the little bit of focus on them. That was really cool.
Yeah.
I think they did
the whole thing is a machine. I mean, it's a $6 billion franchise, and to make that work, to grease the wheels, you need people in positions that ordinarily don't see the camera. And I think that's the beauty of it, is you get to see behind the scenes. And they didn't even touch on all of the 100th anniversary celebrations and the content. So like your Neil A. Shaws and your Don Sperlings, who were behind the scenes creating all this really rich content, didn't even touch on those guys. So I loved it. I geeked out on it. Like I say, I've watched it several times each episode.
I think we all have.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And obviously a big focus on in the series was obviously about the draft and sort of lead up to the draft, but including sort of both draft, free agency, who out of all the new players, who do you think is going to make the biggest, or who do you think needs to make the biggest impact this season?
Yeah, I know there's there's the Malik Neighbours through the draft, etc. There's kind of like the sexy picks, if you will, and but for me, it starts and finishes with the offensive line. So you've got to build from the inside out. So you've got to start to win in the trenches. And when you look back to 1986, you had the Suburbanites, and then you got to 1990, and we held the ball for over 40 minutes in Super Bowl 25. And that all is with the big guys up front, and that's part of who the Giants are. And I think it's not necessarily sexy or sort of headline stuff, but John Runyon, Jermaine Illuminor, those sorts of guys will already have started to pay dividends, because you can see that magic P word that we haven't seen for 10 years, which is a pocket, that Daniel Jones has got time to throw in and
a protected quarterback as well.
Yeah. I mean, and like you said, John Morris said we've done all we can to screw Daniel Jones up. He's had no protection. He's had nobody to throw the ball to. He's had so many different offensive coordinators over time. So I think if he doesn't do it this year, I think it's a make or break year for him. But the offensive and defensive lines for me are where it's at, and where football will never change in that regard.
No, and I mean, you obviously got the likes of, like I said, Illuminor, Van Roten, Runyon, Stinney, Slotman. Those guys on that offensive line have added that depth that we desperately needed. And then on the flip side, you then got someone like Brian Burns, who's just going to wreak havoc on that defensive line and take a little bit of that pressure off of Thibodeau, take little bit of pressure off Dex, and let Azeez Ojulari sort of sit in the shadows a little bit and really shine, because obviously he's had his injury issues. We all know that, but just to add another level to this defensive line. And secondary looks weak, and we know that. Linebacker position, LB2's up in the air with Michael McFadden being injured at the moment and maybe not potentially being ready for the start of the season. But and this defensive front, the D tackles and the D ends as well. Even Elijah Chapman, who in the preseason game at the weekend surprised everyone. I think that one play where he chased a player 30, 40 yards down the field, I think that one play probably earned him a place on that roster.
I mean, that's some amazing hustle, and I think the Giants have sort of let Ryder Anderson go, so that maybe tells you something there. I mean, what I would say about the secondary is, how do you paper over a slightly suspect secondary? You stop the run and you rush the passer. And I think if we can do those two things this year, we might buy our secondary a bit of time, because they're really young. They've got a lot of potential, really young secondary. As we're here doing the podcast today, the Giants and the Jets are at Florham Park. And I think Aaron Rodgers and the wide receivers over there have been giving the Giants secondary all they can handle. So I think for me, it's those first 2 or 3 levels, your D-line, your linebackers, etc. They're the key ones. And then obviously that should buy us a bit more time in the secondary. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a big year for Tibbs as well. He's a good talker and he wants to break Strahan's sack record and he wants to be great. But now's the time to actually stop talking and start delivering. So, and he's got a really good guy on the other side to do that.
Exactly that. Nobody expects that sort of 22.5, 23 sacks in this, from him. But it'd be fantastic if he does break that record. But no, I don't. Especially now that Burns is there, nobody expects that from him. And with Dex there as well, those three alone.
We'd all be happy if Burns got 15 and Tibbs got 15, and then you're right there at 30. Yeah, I mean that's ideal. I think Dexter Lawrence is just a phenomenal player, and he's really coming into his prime. But if you think about people like Bobby Okereke as well in that linebacker unit, he had a phenomenal year last year, and I think if he continues to ascend as well, Pro Bowl or Pro List, and those guys at the front taking up blockers for him, he should have a monster year, Bobby Okereke.
Yeah, for sure. What are your expectations and hopes for this season?
My hopes are, and I think this is another step we've got to take on that ladder, is we've got to be competitive in the division. We've got to start to beat Philadelphia. We've got to start to beat Dallas. If you're going to get out of the NFC East, you've got to beat your rivals. We've been the whipping boys for so many years. It's been embarrassing. And I would say
13 years since we won the division, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I would say for us just to have a bit of a spine, just to start to fight back. And you saw some of that in the practices with Detroit. But there's been so many times over the years where you've watched the Giants and the Cowboys particularly, and the Cowboys are cocky, arrogant, pushing our players around, and we just take it. And you think, right, can somebody just fight back for once? And I think
exactly.
Hopefully we'll see a bit more of a team that isn't going to be pushed around. Then we can start to split some games in the division. That's a big hope for me, really.
I'd be happy with a 3-3 divisional record as long as we can beat the Eagles either at home or on the road. If we can beat the Cowboys at home or on the road, and the Commanders as well. You obviously hope for a clean sweep against the Commanders because they're Washington. But it's the two big boys in the division that we really need to beat to get over that sort of hurdle and get to the next level for sure. All right then. going to finish off with some quick fire questions.
Okay.
I mean, we've spoke briefly about both offense and defense, but who's your prediction to be sort of the most valuable player on offense in terms of, obviously, for the Giants this season?
I'm going back to the O-line, and I'm going to say it's either Jermaine Illuminor or Andrew Thomas. I mean, I think Andrew Thomas so far is absolutely dominant in training camp, and you watch the clips of him against the Texans. He's throwing guys around there as well, and I think he's got something to prove this year. So for me, it's got to be either one of the tackles. If the left tackle or the right tackle can hold up, then we stand a chance. Because if you don't do that, we can't run, we can't pass. The Malik Neighbors is essentially neutralised. So I'm hoping it's Andrew Thomas or it's Illuminor.
Nice. What about on defense?
I come back to Bobby Okereke. I think that guy's going to have a monster year. He seems to be forgotten with the Brian Burns signing, etc., and all these discussions around Elijah Chapman, and rightly so. I think his nickname's a baby bull, 280 pounds, and he ran that guy down in Houston, was amazing. And as Carl Banks was saying, that guy's just earned himself a roster spot. But I think Bobby Okereke coming into that second year with the Giants in a new Shane Bowen system, completely different than what Wink Martindale had before. But Tennessee was always tough. And as you saw in Hard Knocks, you've got Dable saying, give me that defense, number 1, number 2, number 6, number 8, etc., different categories. I think Bobby Okereke can have a huge year for the Giants on defense.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
Let's hope
sure,
so.
Yeah.
Who do you think is going to be sort of your surprise package in the season? What sort of player is going to be a surprise and stand out?
Surprise package, not necessarily too much of a surprise, but perhaps Wan'Dale Robinson. I think what we've got now is a really fast wide receiver core, but you want somebody who can work those underneath zones, those shorter routes, etc., in and out of the breaks really quick. And I think Wan'Dale's prime for that as well. And I go back to the O-line too. I think John Runyon could be really helpful just purely because of his versatility. The guy can play left guard, right guard, centre, etc. Yep. I know he was particularly just at one position with Green Bay, but I think John Runyon could be great. And I think Wan'Dale Robinson could have a good year as well.
Yeah, and I think Runyon, I don't think he's missed a game in his career so far. So.
Yeah, touch wood, he's with the Giants now, so
but that comes back to that smart, tough, dependable. You know, he's definitely tough and he's definitely dependable. So let's hope we don't ruin him.
It's funny that because when you look back at the Giants teams of old that have been successful and that have won games, the thing that stands out for me is personalities. So we've got Dex, we've got Tibbs, we've got Brian Burns, Tay Banks. The guy is always happy, always smiling, uplifting his the players around him, etc. And it feels like we've started to get a nucleus of people in the locker room who other players will gravitate towards, Bobby Okereke, etc. And that feels like eerily similar to like Super Bowl 42, Super Bowl 46, where we weren't the most talented, but we had a really good mix of players and really good mix of personalities. And certainly Dex, I think he's now the leader of that team for sure.
Definitely. Last couple. What's your favourite jersey that you own? Is it the one you're wearing?
My favourite jersey? Yeah, quite possibly. It's a Phil Simms 1986 jersey that I bought a number of years ago. Phil Simms is my favourite Giant of all time. I mean, oddly enough, his birthday is on the same day as mine. He's 3rd of the 11th, 1956, and I'm 3rd of the 11th, 1976. So every year on Twitter, I wish him a happy birthday. Sometimes he'll come back to me and say happy birthday as well, but I'm kind of like his stalker. It's a bit of a running joke.
Well, Phil Simms has wished you happy birthday. That's not a couple of times in the past. And so Phil Simms is my ultimate Giant. I mean, I would say non-player related, it's Wellington Mara. I've got a few things with Mara on, 1 or 2 signed things as well. And I just love Wellington Mara. If I could sit down on a bench and talk for an hour with anybody, it'd be Mara. Fascinating guy. Cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. And lastly, what's the Giants' record going to be in 2024?
Now, I'm ever the optimist. I think it's going to be anywhere between 9-8 or 10-7. I'd probably go for 10-7. I just went through the schedule again yesterday and today, and I'm like, we can win that, we can win this. I've got a starting 3-0 in the season. As you said, splitting some games between the Cowboys, Washington, and the Eagles. I'm sorry, I just can't call Washington the new name. It's just Washington for me. It just doesn't work. But yeah,
it was like when they were the football team, wasn't it?
I actually preferred the football team more than what they're called now. It's just honestly, the millions that are spent on rebrand, and he just got it totally wrong. So I feel that 10-7 is possible, and I think if we stay healthy, if Dable can get the offense to click and our secondary can hold up, then we could be on our way. So yeah, I'll keep my fingers crossed for 10-7.
Nice. I mean, it's over 500, so I'll be happy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a step in the right direction for sure.
And 10-7, you knock on the door of postseason as well.
Yeah,
so
that'd be great to have some meaningful football after Thanksgiving, and so they said, we've been out of the running so quickly in the last few seasons. So
yeah, the season begins at Thanksgiving. I say.
True enough. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's all the questions I've got. And it's been a pleasure you joining me. It's been a pleasure meeting you and having you on here.
Yeah.
It's been a good one. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have too.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk for another 20 minutes, 2 hours. If you give me as long as I need to talk Giants football, we could be at this all the time.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'd love to get you back on the podcast at some point and get your opinions on some of the things, especially throughout the season, in the off season as well. So, I'll have a chat with the guys and we'll get you back on at some point.
Hey, Dan, you know where I am. I do watch your podcasts. I'm a big Giant Insider guy, so. Bit Chris Bizignano.
Man, we love what the Biz and Jerry Foley do. We're all huge fans of Giant Insider. We were lucky to meet Biz last year as well, and he's such a sound guy. And shout out if you're watching Biz. We love you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jerry as well. We love you both. But
I'll tell you what I would like to do. I'd like to have a look around Jerry Foley's man cave. He looks like he's got some pretty cool stuff in there. So as a memorabilia collector myself, he looks like he's got some good stuff there. So.
Yeah, that'd be really cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have.
Yeah, been great to chat. I really appreciate you giving me some airtime, and I'm just an average fan who likes talking about the Giants, and I've really enjoyed this. So thank you.
Aren't we all? We're all just average fans at the end of the day. And those that are watching and listening, we hope you enjoyed the episode. Please make sure you like it, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Our social links are in the description below. Until next time, we're signing off. Let's go Giants.
Once a Giant, always a Giant.